What's up? It's Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, will Maxx Crosby be a Raider in 2026? Will Diego Pavia be a Raider in 2026? The A's are trying in free agency, and the Golden Knights' injury problems are back. Technically Correct is brought to you by Fragile Boxer Flower House. With nearly 2 decades of design experience, Fragile Boxer Flower House is known for creating bespoke couture floral installations for weddings, luxury events, and brand storytelling. Amanda, the owner and designer, leads every detail with a designer's sensibility, offering a fully tailored boutique experience for each client. You can find her on Instagram at Fragile Boxer. Check her out. Big help to me getting some form of sponsorship for this show. So big fan of Fragile Boxer Flower House. Here we go. What are the chances Maxx Crosby's playing his last 3 games for the Raiders to finish out this season? It's one of the biggest questions for the Raiders is what is the future of Maxx Crosby? Are they truly going into a rebuild? Pete Carroll sorta hesitantly said this week that it looks like they're going to have to rebuild after spending his entire tenure saying, we're not rebuilding, I win 10 games. But are they actually going to do it? Is Pete Carroll on board? Is he even back next year? Whoever the coach is he on board? Is Mark Davis on board? Tom Brady? Are they actually going to rebuild? Because if you're truly rebuilding, you're trading Maxx Crosby. Right? You're not talking yourself into, well, we need to keep around the best player on the team, and hey, he's still going to be good in 3 years, and when he's finally good and he's 31, everything will be fine. No. If you're actually rebuilding, you're trading Maxx Crosby. But I don't know that they're actually going to rebuild, because I think the most likely outcome here is that the Raiders go into the draft with a high pick, say, we can take a quarterback and we'll have a good offseason and fix everything and we'll be contenders in 2026. I think that's going to be their version of a rebuild is, hey, yeah, we had a bad year. We'll fix it all in one offseason. And if you can visualize a good team in 2026, there's reason to keep Maxx Crosby, right? He's good. And if you're trying to win in 2026, you want Maxx Crosby on your team. But if they actually rebuild and say this is going to take a while, they should probably trade away Maxx Crosby. Now, after the game on Sunday, quite the embarrassment, but after that game, Maxx Crosby talked to the media in the locker room, and here is the entirety of that interaction.
You gotta watch the film. No words, really, to be honest.
Frustrating you get at this point? I mean, like you said, it's
you just show up and work. That's it. You can get frustrated all you want. You got to get better. You know what I mean? That's all you can focus on.
How do you get better at this stage of time?
You work. Yeah. That's it. Focus on the details. Get better every day. That's all you can do.
So 3 games to go. What is the goal at this point?
Keep getting better. That's it. Improve. Everyone across the board. You know what I mean? You get 17 opportunities guaranteed, and that's all you can do.
That's Maxx Crosby after an embarrassing loss where he doesn't sound mad or upset. He just kind of seems over it. Watch the film, work hard. You get 17 of these guaranteed, just cliche after cliche, because he knows how bad it is and has accepted how bad it is. To be fair, he was yelling at Devin White after one of the Eagles' touchdowns. So there was some anger and passion there. It's not like Crosby doesn't care anymore, but I think the way he sounded in that sounded like somebody resigned to how bad not only this season is, but how this franchise is. Because I think the real question is about what Crosby's going to want. If the Raiders are rebuilding, they should be trading Crosby, but they haven't done it so far. And we've heard Mark Davis say in the past that he doesn't want to trade Maxx Crosby. But what happens if Crosby is the one who asks for the trade? And here's the reality. Maxx Crosby with the Raiders, this is what they've done on a win-loss standpoint. 7-9, 8-8, 10-7 in his 3rd year, and they went to the playoffs. Lost in their first game to Cincinnati. 6-11, 8-9, 4-11, and now 2-12. So since Crosby's been here, there have been a couple of decent, not horrendous years, one playoff appearance, but the rest of it's just been terrible. And it's getting worse since that playoff appearance. They're 20-43. They're horrendous. So Maxx Crosby has not seen very much winning. If you look at it from the continuity or just the competency of the most important spots in the organization, the head coaches that he's had have been John Gruden to Rich Bisaccia as an interim, to Josh McDaniels, to Antonio Pierce, to Pete Carroll. Who's the best of those? I mean, Rich Bisaccia as an interim got into the playoffs, so I guess Rich Bisaccia, but nothing has worked out from a coaching standpoint since Crosby's been here. He has not seen successful head coaching. You look at the quarterback play. It's Derek Carr for a while, some consistency there, but then to Jimmy Garoppolo, then Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and whatever version we're getting right now of Geno Smith. He hasn't really seen good quarterback play. It's probably a little unfair to Derek Carr. There were some good Derek Carr moments and seasons in there, but that's really as good as it gets, right? If Derek Carr is sort of the ceiling of what you've seen, that's not good. So all of that is horrendous. And if you were Maxx Crosby and you spent sort of any time, 5 seconds maybe, reflecting on what this franchise has done at the most important position since you've been here, why would you stick around? Like, what have you seen that makes you think it'll be different next time? So I think one of the big questions of the offseason is, can the Raiders convince Crosby that they can win? I think that's the big question, because Crosby wants to stay, but I think there's going to be an element of how much does Crosby want to win, and can the Raiders convince him of that, right? He's going to be 29 when next season starts. He's not like declining, but he's 29, which means the amount of years he has left in his prime is dwindling. And if you want to be the best player, or at least the best player on a defense of a team that contends for a Super Bowl or even wins a Super Bowl, Crosby doesn't have many more years left of that. So does he see this is like his moment to, hey, I need to get a trade and get out of here and go somewhere else where I can actually win something before my career, or at least my peak, starts to fade, right? Crosby has brought up the idea that he wants to stay with the Raiders and play with them his entire career. They're the team that drafted him. He thinks Kobe Bryant's better than LeBron James at basketball, pretty much because Kobe stayed with the Lakers his entire career and LeBron did not stay with the Cavs his entire career. It's something that he truly values. Does he value it enough to actually do it in his career? And again, can the Raiders convince him he can win? Because let me take you back in time and give you a hypothetical, right? We're going to pretend like Geno Smith was not one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL this year. Instead, he had a solid season. We're going to pretend that Pete Carroll wasn't a disaster. Maybe the offensive line was 22nd best in the league, not 32nd, right? And let's just say the Raiders went 7-10 this year. Not going to happen because they're 2-12, but let's just say 7-10, right? They don't make the playoffs. They're not good, but they're competent, right? They're in a lot of games. They win some of them, right? And there's at least a bit of a vision. I think in that scenario, where even though you missed the playoffs, even though you're below 500, you could still sell Crosby on next season being the year, right? Look, Pete Carroll and Geno Smith brought in some stability and some competency. The offense looks pretty good, right? We got another offseason to fill holes to make the offensive line better, or the secondary, or other guys on the D-line with Crosby, whatever it is, right? There could be legit excitement towards next season of, hey, 7-10 under Pete Carroll in year one. He's changing the culture. Year two is going to be a playoff team, right? I think that would be an easy sell to Crosby, even as a sub 500 team, but that didn't happen. They're terrible. They're 2-12. They're horrendous. So, like, how do you sell Crosby on wanting to stay, right? Is there a new head coach next year? And is that even a good sell to Maxx Crosby, who, again, has seen so many coaches and none of them work out, right? So do you go after a new head coach? Is Crosby at all interested in playing with a rookie quarterback, right? In theory, it takes time for a rookie quarterback to actually start playing well. I know they do in their first years every now and then, but is that a good argument to convince Crosby that, hey, we can win? Because again, Crosby sits down and is realistic, how many years does he have left of being in his prime at this top level? Are you going to wait for Dante Moore or Fernando Mendoza to become a top of the league quarterback, which could happen in year one, but maybe takes until year 3 or 4, and now all of a sudden Crosby's 32 years old and Maxx Crosby's the 19th best defensive end in the league instead of the 5th or 6th or whatever he is, right? I don't know if Crosby says, hey, convince me we can win soon. I don't know what the argument is. I think the argument genuinely is, well, Fernando Mendoza might be good. And I don't know if that's good enough if you're sitting back as Maxx Crosby trying to figure out, hey, can we win anything? So what does Crosby care about the most? He does value staying with the Raiders, staying with the franchise that drafted him, but does he finally say winning is more important? And I would like to go somewhere that has shown some competency that can make the playoffs and win in the playoffs. If he decides that, it might not matter what the Raiders want to do rebuild-wise or go for it next year or whatever. But that, I think, is going to be the big question is, does Crosby want out of Vegas? Now, a couple of updates on the Raiders. Geno Smith looks like he's going to play. He was listed as a full participant in practice yesterday. Pete Carroll was apparently on Sirius XM radio and said there's a good chance that Geno Smith plays this year. In his press conference with the media, he said they're taking it day by day, which is Geno Smith. He said the same exact thing. But Geno Smith did talk to the media, and that is, generally speaking, sort of the starting quarterback press conference. So you would assume he's going to play just because he did the press conference. So it looks like he'll be back at quarterback for the Raiders. Again, I've talked about this. It doesn't matter really if it's Geno Smith or Kenny Pickett. Neither one is the answer at quarterback for the future. If one of them plays really well over these next 3 games, it's not going to convince you that that can be the guy for next season. I think it's possible one of them is the guy for next season. That would probably include the Raiders winning games, falling in the draft, not having a quarterback to pick because they're picking at 6 or 7 or something like that. And that being sort of problematic. And then it's like, all right, well, we couldn't answer that question. Geno Smith's still under contract, so we'll just bring him back for another year. And hey, we're actually rebuilding, so that's fine. So we'll probably see Geno Smith this weekend. Also, probably going to see another rookie. So Pete Carroll said that Charles Grant is going to get some more snaps. Charles Grant was drafted in the 3rd round by the Raiders. It was the supplemental part of the 3rd round, but it was still a top 100 pick. 3rd round pick, and he has played 6 snaps this season. 5 of them were last week against the Eagles. But we are 14 games into the season. A team that is 2-12 and has one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, and whose best offensive tackle, Colton Miller, has been hurt forever now. They haven't given an offensive tackle they drafted in the 3rd round 10 snaps this year. He has not played 10 offensive snaps this season. That's unacceptable for a team that needs to be looking at the future. It's a huge reason why I don't think you can bring Pete Carroll back for 2026 to oversee a rebuild, because he doesn't value it. He doesn't value any of the things that help with the future. He's 74. He probably shouldn't, but that's why you can't bring him back because of this. Because of this, he's not going to do what you need to do in a rebuild, and we've seen it this year, right? The Raiders finally, the last 2 weeks, gave Caleb Rogers, the other offensive lineman they drafted in the 3rd round, finally gave him some playing time, played the whole game last week. Jack Bech, the wide receiver they took in the 2nd round, has been the number 2 wide receiver the last 2 weeks. That was after he was buried on the bench for the entirety of the season. And now we'll get to see Charles Grant play. So at least they're doing it sooner than later, but it's just, this is why it's been such an infuriating season. The 2-12 part obviously is bad, but the fact that they haven't been able to just say, hey, we're bad, we're rebuilding, let's see what the young guys have. They haven't done it. Now, last thing on the Raiders, and I'm probably going to need to get more into this. Maybe later when we get to draft season. But Diego Pavia, the quarterback from Vanderbilt who finished 2nd in the Heisman voting that I voted for to win the Heisman this year, he said he wants to play for the Raiders. So he was with Sketch. Sketch is a streamer who is a Houston Texans fan. He did a stream with Sketch, and Sketch asked him, where do you want to play? And to be fair to Diego Pavia, his first answer was anywhere that needs a quarterback, which is the right answer, right? If you're a quarterback, you want to go somewhere where you can play. But he said anywhere that needs a quarterback. Then he said, but this is where I would like to go, Las Vegas Raiders, so I can play with Maxx Crosby. So if they trade away Maxx Crosby, maybe Diego Pavia doesn't want to come to the Raiders anymore. So again, I need to do more on this, but Pavia is not going to be a first-round pick, right? Pavia is going to be, I don't know. We'll see how much quarterbacks change. We saw Jackson Dart get into the first round last year. We also saw Shedeur Sanders fall from a presumed first-round pick to the 5th. So we'll see where Pavia moves. He might move up. But in theory, this is a day 2, if not day 3 pick at quarterback. So if you're the Raiders, you need a starting quarterback. I can't imagine why you would take Pavia, right? Like, you're probably going to draft high enough to get Mendoza or Dante Moore. Take one of those guys, and then because of contract situations, Geno Smith is probably back next year, or Aiden O'Connell. You don't need a Diego Pavia because you've got the backup position kind of covered. Maybe if they win a couple of games, they're picking 7th, they take an offensive lineman or something, and then they just take a flyer on Diego Pavia in round 4, maybe, and then you come into this year and you give them a look for, I mean, in theory, the full season, but half the season. I don't know. But we'll see if it actually makes any sense. I would love to see it because 1, Diego Pavia is fun to watch as a quarterback in college, and 2, he's going to be entertainment. You might not like him, but he's going to be entertainment. So I kind of hope they somehow end up with Diego Pavia, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Technically Correct is brought to you by Fragile Boxer Flower House. Again, with nearly 2 decades of design experience, Fragile Boxer Flower House is known for creating bespoke couture floral installations for weddings, luxury events, and brand storytelling. Amanda, the owner and designer, leads every detail with the designer sensibility, offering a fully tailored boutique experience for each client. You can find her on Instagram at Fragile Boxer. Coming up next, it's Bischoff's Briefs. Here we go in Bischoff's Briefs. Again, if you want to sponsor Bischoff's Briefs, you can email me at technicallycorrectvegas@gmail.com. I love you a lot. We start Bischoff's Briefs with the Sacramento, soon-to-be Las Vegas A's. So, Ha-Seong Kim signed with the Atlanta Braves. He signed a 1-year deal worth $20 million. But according to Ken Rosenthal, Kim turned down a 4-year deal from the A's. That 4-year deal was worth $48 million. So again, Kim got 20 over 1 versus 48 over 4. He's going to make $20 million this year instead of the $12 million he would have made on the A's deal. Question for him will be, what does he get after this? Is it a bigger and better contract? It's similar, not at the same level, but it's similar to what like Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso did last year, where they didn't get the long-term offer they wanted, so they took the short-term deal worth a lot more money, and now they're free agents again. Or Pete Alonso's already signed, but they were free agents again this offseason. So Ha-Seong Kim, he's been a terrific defensive player in his career. His bat's been average, probably a little bit below average for his for his career. He did get injured and only played in like 30 games last year. So that's a bit of an issue with his contract situation. If he had been healthy, he could have got paid a lot more. And it's probably why he's willing to bet on a 1-year, $20 million deal, hoping that, hey, if I play 120 plus games this year, I'll be valuable. Somebody will give me a better deal than that 4 for 48 that the A's offer. But I'm not too worried about the actual Kim saying no to the A's. What I'm more interested in is that, according to Rosenthal, he was going to play second base if the A's had signed him. The A's have Zach Geloff as a potential second baseman. He had a great start to his career when he first got called up in 2023. It was fantastic. But since then, has struggled. Missed most of last year with an injury as well. He had shoulder surgery late in the season. The A's, though, apparently don't view him as their starting second baseman because they're trying to go get Kim. And Ken Rosenthal wrote in the story that the A's will have to address their second base and third base holes via trade. So that clearly is saying we don't think Zach Geloff is a starting caliber player. So this will be interesting, I think, a little bit of a test-wise for the A's, a team that doesn't really spend a lot in free agency. And what do they do in trades here? Because if you're the A's, I think you could reasonably say, we're probably not contenders in 2026 for the World Series. Maybe if everything goes right, we could make the playoffs. But that's going to be still a little bit of a long shot there. So you could sit back and say, hey, we're just going to let Zach Geloff play second base for the majority of the season, and hopefully he regains his form from his rookie season. And if not too big of a deal because we aren't necessarily pushing for the playoffs next season. Could do the same at third base, but it's not. There's a couple of guys who have a little bit of experience or just not very good experience playing third base. So third base might be even more of a hole than second base. Or do the A's say, no, we're going to go out and make a trade. We're going to go out and find guys that we know are better than Zach Geloff to play second base and a guy to play third base because we're trying to make the playoffs. So we're trying to win right now in 2026. I'm kind of curious to see how they do that. They were obviously interested in signing Ha-Seong Kim. That's not a big deal, 4 for 48, but it's a decent size deal. They were interested in doing that. What do the A's do? I will say this. They should have a good lineup either way, right? Assuming all the guys weren't just good because they were in Sacramento. Granted, they get to play in Sacramento again. But like you go through this, Nick Kurtz and Brent Rooker, Jacob Wilson, Shea Langoliers, Lawrence Butler, and Tyler Soderstrom, that as sort of your top six in whatever order you end up batting them, that's a solid top six of the order, right? Maybe there are going to be some holes in the bottom third of that order, depending on what happens at second and third, but that's a solid top six in the order. And you've got catcher and shortstop covered in that, which two of the premium defensive positions. You don't have center field covered in that. Maybe it's Denzel Clark just robbing a bunch of home runs and not hitting very well. But this should be a pretty good offense. How do they hit outside of Sacramento? How's the pitching over the course of the season will probably determine how good they are. But they should have a good offense either way. In college football, UNLV is going to play Ohio next week in the Frisco Bowl. Ohio officially fired their head coach yesterday. So Brian Smith had been on leave from Ohio since December 1st. And Ohio put him on leave, and they didn't announce why. Didn't say anything as to why. They just put their football coach on leave and were just like, yep, deal with it. Yesterday, they announced that he's fired. And in their press release said that he was fired for engaging in serious professional misconduct and participating in activities that reflect unfavorably on the university. So that could be anything. But 10 TV in Columbus obtained a personnel file stating that Brian Smith had violated the university's alcohol policy by admitting to drinking alcohol in his office, storing it in his desk, and inviting assistants to drink after games. Grant Kiefer tweeted that out. So Brian Smith's attorney had already come out and said, we vigorously dispute Ohio University's grounds for the termination for cause of Brian Smith. He's shocked and dismayed by the turn of events, and we plan to fight the wrongful termination to protect his good name. Coach Smith is an ethical man who has done an exemplary job for the university, has nothing but the best for players, coaches, and the entire Bobcat community. I have a hard time believing they fired their head coach because he had alcohol in his office. Is there probably some rule that you can't do that? Yeah, I guess. But like, I'd be willing to bet a lot of college football coaches have alcohol in their desks right now and have drank at their desks this season. So I can't imagine that they went out of their way to fire the coach for that. And to be clear, Grant Kiefer's tweet and the 10 TV report, they didn't say this is why he got fired. They just said this was in his personnel file. They got a hold of his personnel file. That's just in the personnel file. Doesn't mean that's why he got fired. There could be something completely different, and that's the reason why. But there's got to be more to it. I have a hard time believing of all the things that happen in sports, of everything that we overlook, drinking at his desk is what got him. I don't believe that. So UNLV is going to play a team without their head coach. Meanwhile, UNLV gets their head coach, their quarterback, their running back all coming back, right? They're all saying, yeah, this is great here. Ohio loses its head coach. So UNLV by 20, right? And it's the only way this works out at the end of the day. But be an interesting bowl game. We'll see how exactly Ohio plays under an interim head coach where nobody knows why the head coach actually got fired. In the NFL, Patrick Mahomes, his timeline for recovery from his torn ACL, 9 months, maybe. So he tore his ACL on Sunday. The Chiefs' VP of sports medicine said that his timeline is in the ballpark of 9 months. If you want to count on the calendar, we are looking at August, middle of August next year, maybe middle of September. He did mention that it could go in either direction a month or so. So it wasn't a very hard and fast timeline. Maybe it's October at this point. So for Patrick Mahomes, if everything goes right, it is plausible he's back for week 1 of the season. It is possible the Kansas City Chiefs are ready to go in week 1 with Mahomes. Now, coming off of an ACL injury with no training camp in preseason, or maybe very limited camp in preseason, maybe he's not that good to start the year. But the AFC West next year is fascinating. It's fascinating this year with the Chiefs not making the playoffs. But obviously the Broncos and Chargers are looking like playoff teams right now. But what does it mean for the division next year, right? Denver right now is winning a ton of close games. It wouldn't be a shock to see what happened to the Chiefs this year, happened to the Broncos, where you go from, hey, we went 11-1 in one possession games to, oh my God, we're 2-7 in one possession games and we're out of the playoffs. I don't know if I believe in the Chargers and can they win the division next year. I like Harbaugh and I like Herbert, but it just seems like it's the Chargers. Nothing actually is going to go well. So fascinated to see what happens in that division. Raiders quarterback and head coach situation determines on how close they can get to any of these other teams. But it is sort of that opening. We're seeing it this year and could see it next year because of the injury. That opening of, Mahomes is in Kansas City. He's probably not going to be healthy, and they're probably not going to win the division every year. They'll win it most years, but here's your opening to possibly pounce. Denver and the Chargers are doing it this year. Who will do it next year? Also in the NFL, the Dolphins have benched Tua. Quinn Ewers is going to start. They drafted him in the 7th round. Zach Wilson is the other backup there, by the way, in Miami. But Tua's been benched, and Tua's contract is wild for a quarterback that got benched because he still has, just for next year, $54 million guaranteed. There's even more money guaranteed the following season, but $54 million guaranteed for next season, right? There is a $3 million guarantee that becomes guaranteed on March 15th. So there is a date where if Miami wants to save $3 million, they can cut or trade Tua by March 15th. But if they cut him, because there's more guaranteed money after the $54 million, his dead cap hit would be $99 million for next season. They could spread that out over 2, but it would still be $67 million for next year. If they trade him, that dead cap hit is only $45 million. Only, but it's half of what it could be if they just cut him outright. So if you're Miami, what are you doing with Tua? Because cutting him is not really an option. Having him come back as the starter doesn't feel like an option either, but he kind of has to be on the roster. So here's a proposal for you. How desperate are the Dolphins to trade Tua? Because he's basically untradeable. But how desperate are they? Because the Raiders, who should be going into a full rebuild, have a whole bunch of cap space next year. Whole lot of it. The Raiders could trade for Tua and get a pick from the Dolphins. In theory, you trade for Tua, the Dolphins send you a 2nd-round pick because they're just desperate to get rid of this contract, and you send back like a 6th or something, right? There's something going back to Miami. I mean, can you do future considerations in the NFL? Send back a 6th, whatever. But the Raiders have all of this cap space next season and likely won't be near contending. So you should be doing whatever you can, using whatever assets you can, cap space is an asset, to acquire young players, or at least assets that can get you young players. So if Tua and a 2nd-round pick are out there, and it's just going to eat up your cap space, happens in the NBA, you might want to do it. And by the way, this isn't a trade for Tua and start him next season. I don't care what you do with Tua. He might be your starter, depending on what happens in the draft. But if you end up at number 1 and you love Fernando Mendoza, you draft Fernando Mendoza. And Tua can be the backup if he's okay with that. If he's not okay with that, you can cut him and take on a big dead cap. And it wouldn't be quite as big for the Raiders because Miami would still have some of that after the trade. But you could cut him. It does not matter. You're eating cap space and taking a second-round pick. That's all that's important here. Now, a best case scenario, right, is if you did this, Tua is the backup and Fernando Mendoza is the starter, something like that. You could then cut Tua after 2027. There would still be a dead cap in it. It's like $30 million. So that's probably the downside of this because you might, in theory, be saying we're going to take a quarterback in number 1, and in 2027 we want to be legitimate contenders, and now we got $30 million in dead cap of Tua over here. So that could be the problem here, but you could get out of this after a year if you wanted to. There's a lot of things that the Raiders can be doing, but I think they should be considering any option that gives them assets to get good young players. And the Dolphins sending you a second-round pick for Tua would be exactly that. You would be trading cap space for that draft pick. And I think they should do it if given the opportunity, right? I think it would be a great idea to do that. Don't know if they will. I don't even know if Miami would be willing to give up a second to make that happen. I don't know how desperate they are to get out of that contract. But if that were out there, you should do it. And you should absolutely take that on and have people wondering why the hell they trade for Tua. And you just got to explain, we're getting a second-round pick, guys. We don't care about the cap space for next year. We care about 2028. And we're trading for Tua to do that. This has been Bischoff's Briefs. If you want to sponsor it, let me know. We'll make something fun happen. Shout out to Chad, who is sponsoring part of the show every day this week because Chad just wanted me to give his thought of the day. This week's thought of the day is, how many ducks do you have from Abel Baker? I don't have any ducks from Abel Baker. I've been to Abel Baker. I was not aware you actually got ducks at Abel Baker. That's all I got for you on that one, Chad. That's all I know about Abel Baker. But the Golden Knights lost last night to the Devils. You're not going to believe it. They went to overtime and then into a shootout. Tied at 1 the whole way and ended up losing in that shootout. The overtime numbers are insane. It's now 14 of their 32 games have gone to overtime. It's 5 of their last 7. The NHL record, by the way, is 30 in one season. Golden Knights are on pace to break that mark. They need 17 in their last 50 games to break that mark. Is this going to keep up? I don't know. Like, it's hard to say you're going to play 17 overtimes in 50 games, but they've played 14 and 32. So maybe it goes back to the same thing I've been asking. Like, they just kind of average and they're going to play everybody close. Is that just the reality of it? Maybe. And if so, they're going to play 2 overtimes 17 more times or more this year. And it doesn't seem to matter if they're missing guys or not missing guys. They're going to go to overtime. One thing, though, that would help the Golden Knights quite a bit this year, they're not very good in shootouts. They've been to a shootout 5 times. They've only won 1 of them. And no one scored last night. And they've only now scored on 3 of their 17 shootout attempts, which is 18%. And if you look at last season, they scored on 3 of 19 shootout attempts, which should tell you 2 things. First off, they're bad in shootouts. They can't score in shootouts last year or this year. And second, they've almost taken as many shots in the shootout this year that they did all of last season. We're not even at the halfway point of the year. So they've been to too many shootouts and they're not very good at it. That would be, that's 4 points there that if you were a little bit better, maybe you pick up 2 more points along the way just in a shootout. So that hasn't been great. Overtime hasn't overall been very great this year for the Golden Knights either. But I want to point out, we got a classic hockey is dumb game last night because this game was 1-1. Despite there being 81 scoring chances between the 2 teams. And after overtime, the expected goals were 4.5 for Vegas and 3.6 for New Jersey. What are we doing? Score. Put the puck in the back of the net, guys. But this is part of the reason hockey is dumb is that you have these games where one team, or in this case, both teams, are just all over the net, lots of good chances, and they just don't score. right? I mean, the Golden Knights hit the post, what, 2 times, 3 times in overtime? Like, they just don't score because hockey doesn't always reward you for playing well at hockey. By the way, at the end of regulation, the expected goals were 3.8 to 3.5, so going to overtime might have been the fair result, but there should have been more goals, right? Classic hockey is dumb game. The only way it could have been more hockey is dumb is if, Vegas had 4 expected goals, New Jersey had 1, and New Jersey was leading 4-1 and won the game 4-1. So there's your, hey, everybody does a really good job creating chances, and we just don't produce any actual goals. Also wanted to point out from last night, Mitch Marner was pretty great. And Mitch Marner was pretty great in different or new scenarios. Marner was great without the box score showing it as well, right? He doesn't get a point in the game. He took a penalty in the game. He didn't score in the shootout. The box score would actually tell you Mitch Marner was bad last night. But Mitch Marner had the best expected goals rate of anybody in last night's game at 82%, which is crazy high. And I felt going into that game, you don't have Jack Eichel and you don't have Shea Theodore, right? You're going to need Marner or Stone to sort of step up and be this superstar type of player. And he didn't score, so didn't create a goal with an assist or anything. So I guess it's hard to say superstar level, but Marner was awesome. When he was on the ice, Vegas was very good. And he played some center last night. Bruce Cassidy talked after the game about Riley Smith and Mitch Marner having to play some center because they don't have Eichel and they don't have William Karlsson. So he played sort of a new position last night at center and was still putting up great numbers. When he was out there, they did not give up any great chances. Even his penalty he took, 5 seconds before that, he made a great pass from the goal line all the way up to the opposite blue line that I think Mark Stone just turned it over. Maybe there was a New Jersey stick that got on it, but I thought it was right on the stick of Mark Stone, and he just mishandled it, and it resulted in a turnover. Marner then goes and gets called for tripping, but even right before his, probably worst play, he had made an incredible pass. And then the power play goal to tie the game. Biggest problem the Golden Knights had on the power play with Jack Eichel out was not really creating chances in the offensive zone. It was just getting the puck into the offensive zone. Eichel is really good at just sort of skating it in. I think Jesse Granger is the one who tweeted out that you almost take it for granted because he just skates into the offensive zone and then they set up the power play. That's actually kind of hard to do. And their power play that tied the game late, they had back-to-back chances where they're trying to enter the zone and they get broken up and they've got to try again. And on the third try, Mitch Marner, all right, give me the puck. He just skates it in and then they set it up. They probably don't get that goal or get that point last night if Marner doesn't do that because they might not even score on that power play. And then in overtime, I know they didn't score on it, but they get a power play late. Marner did hit the post on it, so did Mark Stone there, but he was genuinely good on that power play as sort of this 4-on-3 point guard type of play. I know I shouldn't call it point guard. I hate when people use other sports, but basically running that power play from the point, and because it's 4-on-3, the point is pushed in even more. He was very good at creating some chances for Vegas. They just again, didn't score because hockey is dumb. The shootout, I don't know. They're all bad at it somehow. You put on a Golden Knights jersey and you can't score in the shootout might be it. But he was genuinely good last night and didn't get any sort of reward for it in the box score or even a team win or anything like that. I thought that was a very good game from Mitch Marner. Now, the last thing here, and this is where the Golden Knights leave pretty much everybody, and that is the world of speculation. So they didn't have Jack Eichel or Shea Theodore last night. Eichel was called sick or was out with an illness, and Shea Theodore has an upper body injury. That is what Bruce Cassidy said about those two. Now, normally, I think you would hear illness and you would say, oh, okay, he'll miss a game. They don't play again until the weekend, right? He's going to have 2 full days here to recover. Jack Eichel's going to be back soon, right? He's just sick. He'll be able to play. But the way Bruce Cassidy talked last night made it sound like they're not going to have Eichel for at least this weekend because, because he kept talking about other guys playing center, Riley Smith and Mitch Marner, and basically figuring that out with Jack Eichel out. And the way he talked about it made it sound like it's going to be a problem or something they're having to adjust to as the games keep coming. It really sounded like Cassidy was phrasing it as, oh, we're going to have to keep doing this, not oh, we had to do this for one night and now we're good to go. He did not explicitly say, and to be fair to him, he wasn't explicitly asked last night, hey, how long's Eichel going to be out? But he did not explicitly say Eichel's going to be out for weeks or whatever. But it certainly sounded like he's expecting to play some games without Jack Eichel, and they're going to have to figure out who's playing center, how well they can do, what those line combinations are, right? He talked last night that at one point they went Marner with Barbashev and Pavel Dorofeyev on the wings, and Cassidy was like, we're down a goal, we needed some offense. So they're going to be figuring out who's able to play center and who fits well. So it just sounded like Eichel's going to miss some time. How long, I don't know, but it certainly seemed like Eichel's going to be out for a while, which is problematic because that's your best player. And the Golden Knights, I mean, they created a lot of chances last night, but didn't actually score. How well do you fare without Jack Eichel? The Shea Theodore one, upper body injury, we'll see how long he's out, but last night, I'd use this as the best example. Last night, Braden McNabb and Caden Korzak played 16 minutes at 5-on-5 together. The scoring chances were 19-9 in favor of New Jersey when those two were on the ice. That's pretty brutal. I mean, the scoring chances are plus 10 for your opponent, and you're giving up more than a scoring chance per minute when what should be your best defenseman is on the ice. Cassidy switched up the other four. We saw all four of them play together. They were kind of hit and miss, some of those pairs. They didn't play a lot of minutes together, but some of those pairs had good numbers overall. You ultimately had the only goal that they gave up last night was White Cloud and Hanifin. I don't know what they were doing. Combined for a turnover on the wall. And then because they were both on the wall, there's nobody in the center of the ice, and New Jersey's able to just drive the net and score on Carter Hart. So the Theodore one, I guess the big question is, do they have the defensive depth on the NHL roster to deal with the Theodore injury? Because what's your best defensive pairing? Because last night they tried McNabb and Caden Korzak, and it wasn't very good. So what's your best defensive pairing if there is no Shea Theodore? Theodore and McNabb is the obvious answer when they're healthy, but I don't know what it is with no Theodore. You're going to have to mix things around. Does Noah Hanifin step up? Right? Like, do we get a game or a stretch where Noah Hanifin looks like, oh, that's a guy who could be more than just a second pair defenseman on a team? I don't know. We haven't really seen that from Hanifin since he's been in Vegas. He's been fine. There's been nothing really wrong with Noah Hanifin, but he hasn't been anything like amazing or special. So what does this defensive group look like? I mean, the Golden Knights just played a game last night without their best defenseman and without their best forward. That sucks, especially when you're already missing William Karlsson. And if they're going to be without both of them for even longer, that's probably going to be tough. I mean, how many points are they picking up if they don't have these two guys for 2 games, 5 games, 10 games? It's the Golden Knights and injury, so we have no idea how long that actually is. But this has been Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. Thank you so much for tuning in.